Well, another hostage has finally been brought home, and Israel is now closer than ever to having every single hostage back home, with just one fallen hostage still in Gaza.
The first sirens do not howl in the sky. They blink on operator screens deep inside anonymous rooms, as water valves suddenly change position. Fuel pumps stop responding, railway signals freeze, and hospital networks begin to stutter. Before anyone hears an explosion, someone somewhere sees a cursor move on its own. Between Iran and Israel, a second front has opened where no missile is fired, yet entire cities can be held hostage with a line of code. In this silent theater, the shadow war has already crossed borders that aircraft and rockets have not. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. For years, officials described these incidents as technical glitches, isolated malfunctions, temporary disruptions. But when investigators retraced the first major wave, they found an alarming pattern. In the spring of 2020, hackers penetrated Israeli water and wastewater facilities and allegedly tried to alter chlorine levels in the supply, an action that, if successful, could have poisoned civilians or forced massive shutdowns of treatment plants. Digital sabotage had moved from stealing data to quietly testing whether taps themselves could become weapons. Within weeks, a different system on the other side of the region seized up. At Iran's Shahid Raji container port near Bandar Abbas, ships waited offshore as cranes, gates, and scheduling systems fell into chaos. Western officials later indicated that a sophisticated cyber attack, widely attributed to Israel, had disabled the port's computers and caused days of disruption, apparently as a direct response to the water incident. The message was brutal and simple: if you touch our pipes, we can choke your trade routes. That exchange broke an informal boundary. For years, both states had been suspected of probing each other's networks, surveilling officials, and quietly exfiltrating secrets. Now, civilian critical infrastructure was on the table. Israeli cyber officials warned publicly that the strike on water systems marked a turning point, describing a coming cyber winter in which civilian utilities could become routine targets in conflict. Iran, for its part, saw the port attack as proof that an adversary was willing to escalate in the digital domain in ways previously reserved for physical warfare. Behind Israel's side of this confrontation stands Unit 820, the elite signals intelligence and cyber formation that feeds the country's military and intelligence services with intercepted data, offensive tools, and advanced analysis. Former officials have described how alumni of this unit populate the upper ranks of Israel's cybersecurity industry, forming a dense network of expertise capable of building custom malware, exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities, and fusing big data analytics with targeting. The same ecosystem that powers commercial startups also furnishes capabilities for covert operations in hostile networks. On the Iranian side, instead of a single branded unit, there is an ecosystem of state-linked and proxy actors, groups commonly tracked as APT-33, APT-34 or Oil Rig, APT-35 known as Charming Kitten, Muddy Water, Rocket Kitten, Cyber Avengers, and newer clusters associated with the Intelligence Ministry and the Revolutionary Guard. Some of these actors focus on espionage, others on disruptive attacks, and many blur the line between official command and deniable hacktivism. The public timeline of this covert conflict shows how quickly both sides learned from each other. After the water and port incidents in 2020, Iran-linked hackers defaced or disrupted tens of thousands of lightly secured Israeli websites, replacing homepages with threatening messages and propaganda. Soon after, security researchers traced sustained Iranian campaigns against Israeli industrial and municipal networks, probing remote access systems, attempting to compromise programmable logic controllers, and mapping out water and energy infrastructure. Then a new actor appeared with its own signature style. In the summer of 2021, passengers across Iran suddenly saw station boards displaying fake delay messages and phone numbers linked to the office of the country's supreme leader. Behind the spectacle, a wiper malware that researchers later dubbed Meteor had disabled parts of the national railway system, forcing traffic controllers to revert to manual processes. A group calling itself Predatory Sparrow, widely suspected by analysts of being linked to Israel, eventually emerged as the claimed author of such campaigns. Predatory Sparrow did not stop at disruption for publicity. In late 2021, a wave of cyberattacks crippled Iran's fuel distribution network, blocking payment cards at petrol stations nationwide and forcing long queues of motorists to wait for manual overrides. Officials in Tehran blamed foreign states. Predatory Sparrow later claimed responsibility and framed the operation as retaliation for regional actions by the Islamic Republic. For the first time, a suspected Israeli-linked operation had translated code directly into economic paralysis for millions of ordinary Iranians. By late 2023, the pattern repeated on a larger scale. Gas stations across Iran went offline again in another incident attributed to Predatory Sparrow, with the group stating that it had disabled a majority of fuel pumps in the country. The operation signaled that industrial-scale disruption of vital services could be carried out repeatedly, with each incident timed alongside spikes in regional tension or military exchanges. In 2025, after open strikes between Israel and Iran escalated, Predatory Sparrow shifted its focus to the financial arteries of the Islamic Republic. The group claimed to have erased critical data at Bank Sepah, a major state-linked institution, and to have stolen and then effectively destroyed tens of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency from the Nobatex exchange by sending assets to unrecoverable addresses. This operation leveraged financial technology rather than pipelines or ports, but the logic remained the same: using cyberspace to weaken the regime's ability to fund military and regional activities. Within Israel, companies and analysts have documented persistent campaigns by Iranian groups against critical sectors such as water utilities, health providers, local governments, and industrial control environments. Tools used range from spearphishing and credential theft to wiper malware designed to erase data or corrupt systems rather than quietly spy. Even when technical damage has been limited, the psychological effect of seeing hospitals, municipalities, or transport agencies listed as targets has been considerable. While these recent campaigns dominate headlines, the technical roots of this cyber confrontation go back even further, to a different operation that signaled what might be possible. The Stuxnet worm, uncovered in 2010 and widely believed by researchers and officials to have been a joint project of the United States and Israel, sabotaged centrifuges at Iran's Natanz enrichment facility by manipulating industrial control logic while showing operators false normal readings. Stuxnet demonstrated that code could silently cause physical destruction inside hardened nuclear facilities, and it remains a reference point for every strategist thinking about the present shadow war. Inside the control rooms of water utilities, power stations, steel plants, and transportation hubs, this shift feels like a tightening noose. Administrators must assume that any anomaly, however small, might be an intrusion test. A pump starting 2 minutes early, a sensor reading that fluctuates without explanation, a server that slows for no clear reason. Each could represent a probing action. Engineers increasingly study the digital signatures of foreign adversaries, the way previous generations studied missile trajectories. The boundary between civilian and military domains has blurred to the point of near extinction. Financial systems represent another flashpoint. Banks, payment processors, and central clearing mechanisms operate on interconnected digital backbones that, if compromised, could trigger chain reactions far beyond national borders. The attack on Bank Sepah signaled how exposed these arteries are. A larger, simultaneous effort against multiple institutions could freeze transactions, destabilize currency values, and ignite panic. In such a scenario, the distinction between a cyber attack and an act of economic warfare becomes meaningless, and escalation toward physical retaliation becomes far more likely. Intelligence assessments warn that non-state actors may exploit this environment as well. Criminal groups, freelancers, and ideologically motivated hackers have already mimicked the tactics of state-linked teams, sometimes claiming responsibility for operations they did not conduct, other times inserting themselves into the conflict to pursue their own objectives. Their actions complicate attribution, making it harder for governments to determine whether a spike in intrusions signals state escalation or independent interference. In the fog of cyber conflict, mistakes in attribution can be as dangerous as the attacks themselves. Israel's strength in this arena stems not only from Unit 820, but also from a cyber industry that trains thousands of specialists annually. This ecosystem allows for rapid mobilization of expertise whenever new vulnerabilities emerge, and for flexible adaptation to evolving threats. Iran, facing sanctions and limited access to global technology markets, has cultivated its own asymmetric approach, relying on distributed networks of operators who blend espionage, sabotage, and influence operations. Their tools may not always match the refinement of Israeli counterparts, but their persistence and willingness to target softer civilian infrastructure have made them increasingly effective. Observers note that the shadow war rarely follows predictable cycles. Periods of apparent calm can mask deep activity beneath the surface, with both sides planting footholds in each other's networks, waiting for the moment when those footholds might be activated. Critical infrastructure operators in both countries regularly discover dormant malware, hidden command modules, or unauthorized remote access tunnels, suggesting that multiple rounds of digital chess are unfolding simultaneously, each piece moved with long-term strategy in mind. Beyond the immediate participants, neighboring nations fear becoming collateral damage. Regional power grids, oil pipelines, desalination plants, and transport corridors cross borders and share digital control systems. A worm designed to target one country's infrastructure could spread into others, if not tightly constrained. Past global incidents, such as ransomware outbreaks that inadvertently crippled hospitals and shipping companies worldwide, serve as warnings of how quickly a local cyber conflict can escalate into a transnational crisis. The international community has attempted to establish norms for cyber conduct, but enforcement remains nearly impossible. States deny involvement, proxies blur accountability, and the covert nature of operations rewards ambiguity. Unlike nuclear or conventional weapons, cyber tools can be replicated, modified, and repurposed at little cost. Once deployed, they can be stolen or reverse-engineered, enabling other actors to achieve similar effects without facing the deterrent structures that surround traditional armies. Meanwhile, the region watches for signs that the digital shadow war might jump into the physical realm. Observers point to scenarios where a cyber attack on missile warning systems could spark launches based on false readings, or where disruptions at a nuclear facility could be misinterpreted as sabotage requiring military retaliation. The more integrated cyber operations become with national defense structures, the more any disturbance carries existential risk. These fears are amplified by the growing reliance on automation in both military and civilian systems. Autonomous drones, smart logistics networks, and artificial intelligence-driven command tools introduce new vulnerabilities. A successful intrusion could alter data, reroute operations, or deceive decision-makers with falsified information. In a crisis, such misinformation could lead to catastrophic miscalculations, intensifying a conflict that began in silence and code. The deeper this confrontation extends, the more both sides recognize that cyber warfare is no longer a supporting tool, but a primary arena of conflict. Traditional battlefields rely on visibility, troop movements, and clear lines of engagement. Cyberspace erases those lines. An operator sitting thousands of kilometers away can influence the movement of trains, the pressure of fuel lines, or the distribution of drinking water. Actions once requiring aircraft, explosives, or specialized teams can now be executed by a handful of skilled individuals with access to the right exploits. This shift has redrawn the strategic map of the Middle East. Inside Iran, the psychological impact of repeated disruptions has accumulated quietly but steadily. Fuel shortages caused by digital sabotage force citizens into long queues, creating images of instability. Banking outages generate anxiety about savings, wages, and the reliability of the financial system. Transportation interruptions delay goods and weaken public confidence. Even when these failures are temporary, they plant seeds of uncertainty about the state's ability to protect essential services. In societies where the government plays a dominant role in daily life, a single cyber strike can ripple into political consequences larger than the technical damage itself. Israel faces its own vulnerabilities. The country's advanced digital infrastructure, while highly secure, is also deeply interconnected. Hospitals, desalination plants, emergency response systems, and national databases all rely on complex networks. Iranian-linked intrusions targeting these systems have demonstrated that even with strong defenses, gaps remain. When attackers probe election infrastructure, health systems, or water monitoring networks, the intent extends beyond sabotage. It aims to erode trust in institutions and generate doubt about the safety of everyday life. For a nation accustomed to preparing for physical threats, the invisible nature of digital attacks challenges old models of defense. Behind every public incident lies a hidden layer of operations that never reach headlines. Cyber forensics teams in both countries spend countless hours tracking command and control servers, isolating infected systems, and reconstructing the steps adversaries use to penetrate networks. Many of these intrusions unfold slowly, beginning with a single compromised password or an overlooked vulnerability, then expanding silently through internal systems. By the time an anomaly is detected, attackers may have spent months collecting intelligence, mapping control structures, or preparing mechanisms for future disruption. As these covert activities expand, regional alliances also shift. Countries that once relied primarily on conventional security cooperation now seek assistance in bolstering digital defenses. Intelligence sharing increasingly includes indicators of malware, signatures of state-linked groups, and insights into industrial vulnerabilities. Cyber defense commands are being formed across the region, and private cybersecurity firms have become essential actors in what used to be purely governmental domains. The Middle East is no longer defined solely by oil routes and territorial disputes. It is now a dense web of competing digital fortresses. The strategic calculus for both Iran and Israel has grown more complicated. Each understands that large-scale digital attacks can escalate into real-world conflict. At the same time, each sees cyber operations as a way to apply pressure without triggering direct confrontation. This balance creates a paradox. The very tools meant to avoid war can increase the risk of it. A misconfigured script, a misinterpreted alert, or an accidental spillover into civilian systems could prompt retaliation, far disproportionate to the original intent. Cyber warfare, by its nature, carries a constant risk of spiraling beyond control. Energy infrastructure represents one of the most dangerous potential flashpoints. Pipelines, refineries, and power plants all rely on industrial control systems that, if tampered with, could cause fires, explosions, or prolonged outages. Analysts warn that a coordinated attack on these facilities could destabilize markets, trigger humanitarian crises, and invite immediate military responses. The attacks on Iranian steel facilities already demonstrated how industrial processes can be manipulated to cause physical malfunctions. A similar incident targeting refineries or power stations would raise questions about red lines and acceptable thresholds of escalation. Another area of concern is submarine communications cables. Israel, Iran, and their neighbors depend on undersea fiber lines for global connectivity. Tampering with these networks, either digitally or physically, could isolate entire regions from the internet, disrupt financial markets, and cripple military communications. Because attribution is difficult and repairs can take weeks, interference with undersea cables has become an increasingly discussed scenario in intelligence assessments. Any such operation, whether real or suspected, could instantly raise tensions across multiple states.